Hello, welcome to Number by Color. I'm Todd, and today I'm going to discuss Borderlands 3. Borderlands 2 was a really great game, and at the time that it was released, I couldn't really picture what its successor would look like. Now that I know, I'm happy to say that it's a mostly satisfying experience, especially in the ways that matter most: the loot, the humor, and the customization. I want to mention that this review is mostly spoiler-free for Borderlands 3, and that all the footage is from the first 10 or so hours of the game. Okay, let's go. Borderlands 3 released on September 13th, 2019, almost exactly 7 years to the date from Borderlands 2's initial release, and 5 years since the pre-sequel. Seemingly taking their game development cues from Square Enix, Gearbox Software waited a long time to get this game out, and oddly enough, that both helps and hurts it. Fortunately, it's ultimately an experience worth having, especially for Borderlands fans. But let's break down the game into its parts to see what it does really well, and what things could still use a little more time to bake. First up is the story. If you've read or seen anything about this game, you probably already know the gist of the story. Troy and Tyrene Calypso, aka the Calypso twins, are searching for vaults around the galaxy. These two are basically Pandora's version of social media influencers, especially since they have literally influenced hundreds of their fans, known as Children of the Vault, into fighting for them. You are one of 4 new Vault Hunters working with Lilith and the Crimson Raiders to find these vaults and to make sure the Calypsos don't get what they're looking for. It's a decent story with humor throughout, and there are some turns here and there that add a few nice wrinkles, but the way it's executed makes it less engaging than it should be. I know the Borderlands series isn't necessarily known for its dynamic stories, but Borderlands 2 had really good pacing. Tales from the Borderlands, the Telltale Games adventure spin-off, had great characters, and even the newly released Borderlands 2 DLC, Commander Lilith and the Fight for Sanctuary, was pretty strong in its setup for Borderlands 3. Actually, that DLC is probably where Borderlands 3 begins its misstep. See, in Borderlands 3, the hub city of Sanctuary is now a spaceship, and instead of staying on Pandora for the whole game, you'll be traveling to different worlds. This is good for locale diversity, but in my opinion, it's bad for the story. Or at least, its implementation here is. Essentially, all the characters you know and love from previous games are split up, and you'll only ever encounter several on each world you visit. I can't quite put my finger on why, but for some reason, this really messes with character development. It almost feels like characters are siloed off in a way, where they only appear for a short time before handing off the story to the next character. There isn't much time for them to grow or even develop, and a lot of time it comes off as, hey, here's a cameo for this character, remember them? I really would have liked to have seen more direct involvement from Tiny Tina, Mordecai, and Brick, just to name a few. And don't even get me started on Ellie as a replacement for Scooter. She cannot hold a candle to him, and I'm still disappointed at whoever thought it was a good idea to kill him off in Tales from the Borderlands. With all that being said, the story here isn't really that bad. It just has some pacing problems, and there is a general longing for familiar faces. I will say though that the humor in this game might be pretty divisive, so if you don't think you'd still enjoy the humor from the first 2 games, you might not like it here because it is pretty much the same kind of humor. Next, let's talk about gameplay and everything involved with that. I should probably mention that I played on a base PlayStation 4 with software version 1.03. The unfortunate disclaimer here is that there are many small annoyances I encountered that can likely be fixed through patching, but the review has to reflect the state of the game as it was when I played. The primary gameplay loop of Borderlands is back and better than it ever was. You'll be shooting enemies, picking up dropped loot, leveling up, and slowly unlocking new skills as you fight your way from planet to planet. And speaking of loot, this game greatly increases the number of guns at your disposal. There are so many new and different iterations and types that there's always a feeling of progression, and experimenting with new loadouts is highly encouraged and rewarded. Many weapons now have a secondary firing option too, which allows for even more customization. Also new to this game are the abilities to slide and climb. Sliding is a nice addition to combat that adds some momentum and strategy to encounters. Climbing adds verticality to the game, and it's a welcome complement to traversal and exploration. A weird issue I had is that I always felt like there was a lag when it came to aiming. Basically, it took a millisecond or two for the reticle to move after I pressed the stick. I was able to get used to it for the most part, but it was always present, and I wonder if that lag exists on other platforms as well. One annoyance I do want to mention is that bosses in this game seem to be very poorly balanced. Granted, I played as Amara the Siren, so my experience may be different from yours, but there were a handful of boss fights that were just straight up not fun. Some fights that I thought were bad at first were really just me not understanding how that boss worked, so I'm pretty sure the ones that I didn't like were actually not good. Bosses in this game have such large shield and health bars that they can all take a while to beat, so the ones that were most annoying were the ones that never stopped moving and using attacks. Not only did they take a long time to beat, they were just aggravating, and some seemed to infinitely spawn other enemies, so most of the time fighting was just dealing with non-boss enemies. I know that they were there to help get second wins, but it was still a frustration. Again, though, that was only a few bosses, and in general, the bosses in this game are some of the better ones in the series. Overall, I'd say the combat in this game is the best and most diverse it's ever been in a Borderlands game, and I really like the customization options. When you're not fighting, you'll be traveling long distances. One thing this game does better than previous games is reward you for exploring. There are many side challenges to complete and many hidden items to discover, including hidden audio logs, Iridian artifacts, mini-bosses, and more. This helps making the tedium of travel a little less, well, tedious, and incentivizes exploration. Additionally, there is also a fairly robust post-game progression system called Guardian Rank that offers stat boosts beyond the normal level cap of 50. This is similar to the badass ranks from Borderlands 2 and the pre-sequel, but it can only be unlocked after you complete the game. It's basically the game's way of keeping you playing while we wait for the story DLC. There are other modes unlocked as well, including playing from the beginning again at a harder difficulty, so don't worry about that. For my playthrough, it took me about 38 hours to finish the campaign and do a majority of the side missions, as well as get a lot of the collectibles. I ended up at level 42, which seemed a bit higher than normal from a single playthrough, but I still plan to go back and do more. One last thing I want to mention about gameplay is the menu system. It's truly bad in this game. It's not unusable, but it's definitely worse than Borderlands 2 for a few reasons. First, it's clunky and unresponsive. Seriously, a large part of this game is weapon management, and that's all done in menus. Menus are slow and lag a lot, always. Comparing guns is a chore when it takes a second or two for the cursor to move for every item you're comparing. It wasn't like this in Borderlands 2, and it shouldn't be like that here. The menu layout is also worse than Borderlands 2, which in my opinion was actually pretty good. Fast travel is also a little confusing at first. The weird thing about it is that you don't even need to be at a fast travel station to do it, which turns out to be very helpful, but it makes me wonder why the stations need to exist if not just to be points to travel to. The most egregious part of the menus, though, is the map. Again, Borderlands 2 did a great job with this. How is it that we're regressing? I like that the map is 3D. I think it looks cool. What I don't like is that when you open the full map in the menu, it always orients itself to the direction you're facing. However, the mini-map, if you set it properly, is always static. That means that you can be going south on the mini-map, but when you open the full map, it looks like you're going north. This makes it really difficult to determine which direction you actually need to go to get to where you need to be. The icon indicating the destination on the map is not really helpful either, because it doesn't take obtrusions into account. So you could be walking in the direction of the destination only to realize that there's suddenly a gulf that you needed to go around. Look, all these things are annoying, but they didn't break the game for me. I feel like I have to mention them for the sake of giving a comprehensive opinion of the game, but these things won't keep me from wanting to play more, and I'm hoping future updates improve these issues. The art of Borderlands has always been part of the selling point for me personally, and Borderlands 3 is really a refined version of that. The environments are colorful and varied, the characters look better and more expressive than ever, and the player customization options are deep. I really don't have any complaints here, except that I wish it were easier to unlock the different heads and skins you can purchase, if that makes sense. The music in Borderlands has always been enjoyable, for what it is. Most of the time, it's sparse acoustic ambient music, with occasional metal or dubstep being played for boss fights and big encounters. The same composer is back, which helps give the series an audio cohesion that I appreciate. The voice acting is all pretty good, which is expected, but I do want to mention that Claptrap being played by a different person is definitely noticeable, and it's definitely worse. I applaud them for getting it as close as they could, which is still pretty close, but it still lacks some of the charm. This is probably a personal preference issue, but I find with a lot of games like this that the vocal audio is always poorly mixed. If there is music or fighting happening when somebody is talking, it's almost impossible to hear them over it, unless you reorient yourself or turn down the music and sound effect volume separately. It's just odd that it wouldn't be mixed better to begin with. As far as trophies go, this may be the most attainable list in the series. It will still require a bit of work, yeah, but there are no class-specific trophies, so the quote-unquote hardest ones will be the ones for collectibles and exploration. But with Guardian ranks and being able to fast travel from anywhere, revisiting locations is more convenient than in previous games. All in all, I really enjoyed my time with this game. Sure, there are technical issues that shouldn't exist in a new AAA game, and the story stumbles several times, but the core Borderlands experience is preserved and improved on here, and that's what matters most. I'm definitely looking forward to playing what the future Season Pass DLC has to offer, and as long as it doesn't make the menu system even worse, I don't foresee my opinion of this game changing in a negative way. I've always loved how Borderlands handled its mix of first-person shooter and RPG elements, especially how there's a tangible feeling of progression with every new character level and new weapon. Borderlands 3 is a great game and a good iteration on the series, and it definitely comes recommended to those who love open-world RPGs or shooters with loot mechanics. If you played this game, let me know your thoughts. Who did you play as? I played as the Siren, and I feel like that's always the hardest class to use in the beginning of the game until their elemental abilities are leveled up, but I think that's part of the fun of that class. Well, alright, I better get going. I finished this game, but I gotta get on to the next. If you like this video, feel free to subscribe, and maybe come talk to me on Twitter? Till next time, adios.